Okay, welcome to the Getting Started with RootsMagic. When you first start RootsMagic, you're going to have the RootsMagic news screen come up like this. This is where you're going to see the latest news. We're going to go ahead and go past that. And you're going to come up to a screen, welcome to RootsMagic, what would you like to do? And the first thing we're going to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of cover the basics of getting started with RootsMagic. It's not going to be so much in-depth because we have a lot of classes coming up in the future where we're going to be able to go in-depth with each individual little feature here. But we're going to kind of, hopefully, even if you have been using RootsMagic for quite a while, you will learn something from this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file. Now there's a couple of ways I can do that. I can either click right here, if you can see my mouse, where it says create a new file. If this screen isn't available because maybe you've told it, don't ask me this again, you can also get to the create a new file from the file menu up here. So let's go ahead and create a new file, and it is going to ask a couple of things. This screen has a number of things, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to type a file name, and you can just type your last name or whatever you want to use for your file name. The second part is the file location. By default, it's going to put that file into your Documents folder. That's usually the best place, but if you want it to go someplace else, you can go ahead and click that button and change that. There's going to be a number of options here for what date format you want to use. What number do you want to display after the name? These are items that you can always change later. The same with these options over here, displaying surnames as uppercase, turning on LDS support or new family search support. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the defaults and click OK. And RootsMagic is going to create a new blank database. So this is kind of where we're going to start. What I intend to do is kind of show you the very basics, how to go in and add people, the first few people, that type of thing. And then I'm going to switch over and bring in a full database that already exists so that I can show you how the various other features are going to work. So the first thing I want to do is right here where it says click to add a person. I can go ahead and click that little slot to start adding the person, or I can come up here to the toolbar where I have add people to the database, and I can click on that. Now you'll notice that there are 4 different ways to add a person to the database. I can add an individual. That means I'm going to add a brand new person that hasn't been entered before. I'm going to just start from scratch and enter a brand new person that's not linked to the tree in any way. The other 3, spouse, parents, or child, let me add a person to another person that already exists. I can add a spouse to the highlighted person, I can add parents to the highlighted person, or I can add a child to the highlighted person. So this time I'm going to go ahead and add an individual, and RootsMagic is going to come up and ask me for information. So I'm going to go ahead and, let's say my name is John Doe. I'm going to type in my name, John Doe. I'm going to enter my sex, and I can either click and select from the options, or I can just press the first letter of the option I want. Prefix, okay, maybe I'm a doctor. That's something that is going to come before my name. Suffix, that's something that's going to come after my name, maybe junior, senior, the third, emperor, whatever. Then I'm going to go ahead and go to the nickname field. Now if you happen to have a nickname, my nickname happened to have been Tiger up until I was 5 years old, and then I decided that wasn't my nickname anymore. Then I come down here to the birth date. Now I can enter the birth date directly, or I can click the little button to bring up a calendar so I can select the birth date. And from this calendar, I can come over here and I could actually just type in the year right here to switch to the calendar for that year, and then I could just select a date. There's also a date calculator where you can do things like enter a start date, an end date, and it will calculate the age. Or you can enter a start date and an age, and it will calculate the end date. If you enter any 2, it will automatically fill in that third one. That's actually really useful for things like tombstones where it says this person died on such and such date at the age of this many years, months, and days. You can enter that end date and the age, and that will give you at least an approximate birth date for that person. So I'm going to go ahead and enter a date, and you can enter it in pretty much whatever format you want. Now, I'm going to enter it in the month/day/year format. You'll notice when I move away from that, it changes that to May 10th, 1959. Now, not everybody wants it to do that. Some people would want 5/10/59 to be turned into October 5th, 1959. And there's an option that'll let you do that, and I'll come back to that in just a bit. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and type in the place. Okay, and as I type in the place, I can type in the country too if I want to. Okay, now there's also a button for the place list, and what that will do is bring up a list of all the places that I've ever entered. At this time, this is the first place I've entered, so that doesn't really help much. Okay, I haven't died yet, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that one blank, and then I'm going to just go ahead and click OK. Okay, RootsMagic has now added my record to the file and has opened up the edit screen for my information. So adding a person is really two steps. The first step is the add a person screen where you're going to add just basic information. Okay, it says I got several requests to get closer to my microphone. So I'm going to scoot it up as far as I can, so I'm going to scoot my microphone closer to me. Is that better? Okay, I didn't hear anything, so I'm going to assume it was. Okay, the adding a person is actually a two-step process. It's adding the person with that one screen we just saw, and then it's bringing in the edit screen for that person where I can add anything I want about that person. So you'll see it's already filled in my name information and that birth information that I filled in, but I could come up here and I could add other facts. So if I click on Add a Fact, I can go ahead and select other fact types, or I could just start typing. If I wanted to enter in graduation information, I can just type in the first couple of letters of graduation, click Select, and RootsMagic has added a graduation event to this person, and I can go ahead and just start filling in the information. Now let's say I only know the year. That's fine. I don't have to enter full day, month, and year. I can enter just the part that I know. The place. Okay, I happen to graduate in the same city that I grew up in, so as I start to type it, you'll notice that it automatically starts to fill in places that I've typed in before. And then place details. Place details is a place where you can enter more than just the city, county, state, country, that type of information. This is where you can enter information like the name of the high school. Or if you're entering a burial, that could be the name of the cemetery. If you're entering a birth, that could be the name of the hospital. If you're entering a residence, that could be the street address. So enter in as much information as you know about that particular fact and go ahead and save that. Now, as you add facts to this person's list, you are going to get a timeline of that person's life. RootsMagic will automatically sort the rows, the events that you add, and build a timeline or a chronology of that person's life. Now, you're not limited to just one of a particular fact type. If you have
Bruce, we had one question about why is there no age, and maybe you can point out there on the timeline the age.
Okay, yeah, the age is right here. So as you enter the information, RootsMagic is automatically calculating the age for you. Now, if you have any events that happened after the person's death, such as burial, the will being read, probate, it won't show an age for those. The age calculation goes up to the death fact and then stops at that point. Okay, but like I say, you're not limited to just a single fact type. So if you have two different birth dates for a person, you can enter two different birth facts. So right here I have a birth fact, but I could go up and say add a fact, and if I wanted to, I could add another birth fact right here with the conflicting date, conflicting place, whatever, and then I could add sources for each of those pieces of information. And sources are a very important part. We're not going to spend a lot of time in this getting started on sources. We do have a webinar a little bit later this month on how to enter sources. It's an entire hour devoted just to sources, but we will touch on it just a little bit. So I go through and I create as many of these fact types as I want, and for a particular fact type, you'll notice as I select a piece of information in the list, over on the right, in addition to being able to edit the date and the place and all of that information, I also have some buttons where I can enter a note for that event, sources for that event, media for that event, and then I can also share this fact type with other people within the database. And we'll talk about that. We'll have an entire webinar on sharing facts. If I want to delete a particular piece of information from my database, I highlight it, and I come up to delete fact, and I delete it right from there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this, and you'll notice that it has now added my information to the main screen in the primary person slot on this. Now, at this point, I can continue on and add some more people. I can click up here to add the father, I can click to add the mother, or I can highlight the person, come up to the add button, and say add parents right here, in which case it will step me through adding the parents, the father and the mother. So if I go ahead and say I want to add parents, I have two options. I can add a new person, which means I'm typing a brand new person in from scratch right here, or I can say I want to select an existing person. Now that's useful if you've brought in data from a GEDCOM file or some other place, or you've entered this person in before and they are related to this person in a different way than they were related to somebody else within the file. And if I say select existing person, that brings up a list of everybody in my file, and I can just pick them from the list and it would add that person as the father right there. The reason for that is you don't ever want to enter a person into your database more than once. Even if that person has multiple relationships within your family, even if the cousins marry each other, anything like that, you never need to enter a person more than once. You will always, if that person's already in there, you will just select that person and say select existing person, and it will reuse that person. So in this case, I'm going to add a new person, and I'm going to enter the father's name, Raymond Doe, and you notice it's already got a few of these defaults already filled out. You're welcome to go in and change those if you need to. Same thing for the birth. I could enter I can enter a birth date, I can enter the birthplace, and so on. Now, one thing that you'll notice is when you're on this add person screen, it's only asking you for just a few basic pieces of information. It's asking you for the person's name, their sex, and then the birth, death, and burial. Now, once you've added that person, that's when it brings up that full edit screen where you can enter anything you want. But a lot of times you may be entering data where you have a particular piece of information that you're needing to enter over and over and over. So rather than having to wait until you get to that edit screen to do that, you have an option right here, and you can do for customizing this form, and you can select this at any time. So if I click on customize this form, RootsMagic brings up a little screen right here where I can choose what pieces of information I want it to ask me for up front. So for example, I might say I want to add another fact type to the form, and it's going to bring up a list of all the different fact types that I have. So maybe I want to add christening. Maybe I'm entering a lot of christening pieces of information. So in addition to birth, death, and burial, I want it to ask me for christening up front as well. So I can select that. It adds christening to my list. Now in this case, I don't want christening to be at the end. I'd like it to be up, so I can highlight that and move that so that it comes between the birth and the death. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And I now have the birth, christening, death, and burial. I can also, from that same screen, select fact types and delete them. So I can go in here and customize this anytime I want. So if I'm going to enter a batch of data that has a particular type of field that I'm going to want to be filling in regularly, I can go ahead and add that and use it until I'm done with it, and then come back in and delete it back out of there. So I would just go ahead and fill in whatever information I need to on this, click OK. Now it's going to ask me for the mother's information. I'm going to say I want to enter her information. Maybe her name is Mary Smith. Fill in whatever I need to on her screen, and you'll notice there's that christening date. It's going to stay there until I turn that off in the customized form. Click OK, and then it asks me, do I want to add a marriage event to this couple? Okay, if I know they were married, even if I don't know the date, I still want to go ahead and add a marriage event. RootsMagic does not assume that this couple was married unless it has a marriage event. So if I were to say no marriage right here, RootsMagic is going to not assume that that couple was married, and so it's going to, in reports, refer to them as not being married. It's not going to refer to them as husband and wife. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say I want to add a marriage event, even though I don't know the date and place, and it adds the father and the mother to this screen. Now I can continue on doing this exact same thing. I can highlight the father and add his father and mother, or I can highlight this person and I can come in and say add a spouse, and it works exactly the same. So you should get used to this very easily. I'm going to add a new person, Wilma Jones, and enter whatever information I have on her. Go ahead and add a marriage event, fill in her information, click close, and I now have a little arrow next to his name that if I click on that, it's going to take me down to show him and his wife. Okay, so that's basically how to add people. Very straightforward. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you a feature that you probably or hopefully you'll never use, and that is under the File menu, there's an option called Delete. When you click on Delete, what this is going to let you do is delete your database. Now, in the past, we used to make this really easy to do, and our tech support people got mad at us because they had to keep explaining to people that did file delete why that deleted their file. So now we tell you this is going to completely erase the database from your hard drive, and you have to agree, yes, I want to do this. Okay, if you don't check that, this is not going to work. So I'm going to delete that database. When I do that, that database is now completely gone, and it's taken me back to the welcome screen. So what I'm going to do is I could do any of these options. I could create a file or open one or import a file from a different program. RootsMagic can import databases from PATH, Legacy, Family Tree Maker versions 2006 and earlier, Family Origins, or GEDCOM. And so if I had data in another program, it's really easy to bring that over. So I'm going to come down here though, and I'm going to actually open this file. This is a file that I already have open, and so if you have other files you've opened in the past, they're going to be listed there, and I'm going to go ahead and choose that. Okay, this is the RootsMagic screen with a populated database. So this is actually what you're going to be seeing, and so what I'm going to do is the rest of this time I'm going to spend covering some of the features in here. Now, one of the features that I really like is what's called color coding. And color coding lets you add color to people to bring out trends or to show family lines. So what I want to do is I want to make each one of these family lines, these 4 family lines, my grandfather, great-grandfather, or grandmother, and my other grandfather or grandmother in this particular database. I say mine, this is not my data. If you see a name that looks familiar, please don't contact us because this is a fake database, completely fake, so none of these people really existed. But I want to make each of these 4 family lines different colors. So I'm going to select select the grandfather. I'm going to come up to Tools, right up here on the menu, and from Tools, I'm going to go down to color code people. When I color code a person, I'm going to choose what color I want and which group of people that I want to have that color. In this case, I want it to be the ancestors of the current person. Click OK, and that line is now red. And I can just repeat that for each of the 4 lines, but pick a different color each time. Now you'll notice there's also an option down here, select people from a list. Color coding will actually let you do things like color code everybody who was born in California, color code everybody who was born between this date and that date. So you can color code on any group of people that you want. I happen to color code family lines, but you can use this color coding for temporary purposes to kind of make a particular group of people stand out. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. That last one I'm going to make purple. And I now have my 4 lines color coded. Now what's nice is that this color coding is not just on this one particular screen. It's on each of the screens, each of the main navigation views that we have, the family view, the descendant view, people view, the web search. It's also available in the side list. So as I scroll up and down through this list of the people in my database, you'll see those are color coded. So I can tell exactly which line they came from. Now let's kind of talk a little bit about the different screens. In RootsMagic, we have 5 navigation screens. Now as I move from person to person, that person's information, yes.
Hey Bruce, we had a question about the color coding.
Okay.
If you have family lines that crisscross, which color does the person get? Okay.
When you're using color coding, the last color wins. So what that means is if you got lines which cross, if you color code a line red and then you color code another line blue and a person that was in that blue line was also red, that person will become blue. It will be the last color. We haven't improved the technology enough to make it purple or to make every other letter red and then blue. So right now the last color is going to win.
Okay. And then also someone asked if you can print in color when you use the color coding.
Yes, when you're color coding, in fact, let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's say I want to do a pedigree chart. If I come up here to the printer button on the toolbar, that's the one that just turned orange. If I click on that, I have a list of types of or categories of reports, and a pedigree chart would be considered a chart. So I'm going to select charts, and here's pedigree chart. So I'm going to choose pedigree chart and say create the report. Many of these reports will have an option like this that says color coding. They'll have a lot of other options, but a lot of them will have ones that say color coding. If I don't check that, my report's going to be in plain old black and white. But if I turn on color coding, when I generate that report, you'll see that my pedigree chart is color coded here. So the different lines are colored, and including the index. If you would like your index to be color coded, you can do that as well. Now one thing, if you have a black and white printer, please don't call tech support asking why it's not printing in color. Okay, our tech support doesn't like that question when people with black and white printers call up and say, I printed this and I just can't get the color to come out. Okay, so yes, you can print that in color.
One thing that I like about the color coding, if you can go up to Howard Smith Sr. and then click on the family view, which I know you're going to look at next.
Yeah, actually I need to go up one more generation on this. One of the things that's great, if you take a look at this particular family, in the family view, the way the family view works is you've got father, mother, and the children, and then you also have the grandparents. Well, you'll notice the children, there's a bunch of these children's lines where they are married and have children of their own. Well, a lot of times you will be wandering around up in your tree in this family view, and you'll get into a family you're not as familiar with as other parts of the family, and then you'll wonder, which one of these lines am I supposed to come back down to get to myself? Which one of those is my ancestor line? And you normally can't really tell very easily because you may have a bunch of these arrows. But by color coding your direct ancestors, it makes it very clear Howard Smith in this case is that common ancestor because I color-coded my ancestors, so it makes it really clear that that's the line I want to come back down to get to myself. Now, if I do want to get to myself, there's actually a shortcut. Under the search menu, there's an option right here called Go to Home to Root Person, and you'll see that the shortcut is Control Home. If I get lost in my tree, I can just press Control Home or come to this menu item, and it will jump back to me as the starting person within the file. So that's a quick way to get back to yourself. Now, a lot of times you may have children within a family and they aren't in the right order. Well, if that's the case, from this family view, you'll see right here in this corner, okay, there's a little up and down arrow. If I click on that, RootsMagic will bring up that list of children where I can rearrange them in the order that I want. And I can select one and just move them up or down. Or I can just say sort by birth date, and it will automatically sort that entire group of children by their birth date. Okay, I can also move up and down a generation at a time. Over here on the right side, the far right, you'll see the little arrows next to the grandparents' names. That lets you move up, back and forth a generation at a time. Okay, you'll also notice that there's little buttons right here. I want to kind of explain this because this is one of the common questions we get. These buttons, if you click on the button, it is going to show you the spouses for that person, okay, including the ability to add a new spouse. So, for example, for the mother, she has 2 spouses, James Smith and George Smith, but I can come down here and add another one. I can select the other one and switch to that other family just by selecting. I can switch back and forth really quickly between the different spouses. The confusion that some people have is they will look at the father and they will contact us and say, all my fathers have the little pink circle, but my father was not a woman. Okay, that color is indicating that this is for spouses. So the father, that indicates that those are the spouses. The mother, that indicates that those are her spouses. So just so that there's, in case there's any confusion, hopefully that'll clear that up a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and go to that third view. That third view is the Descendant View. Now the Descendant View is anywhere from a 2 to 7 generation descendancy of that person who was highlighted. So if I want to, right now it's showing up to 5 generations. There's the 5th generation. It's showing up, actually that's not the 5th generation. Okay, if I go to here, there would be the 5 generations. And I can increase that up to 7, or I can decrease it. I can go down to 4, to 3, to 2. So I can just select right here and easily collapse my descendant list down to just that immediate family, or go up to just the person and up through their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, and so on. So you can just really quickly do that. Okay, the fourth view is the people view. Now the people view is a very powerful view. It looks like just a simple list of people, and for the most part that's what it is. If I were to scroll up and down through that list, it's just an alphabetical list of the people in the file. Okay, but I can click on a person's name within that and just start typing their last name. And as I start typing their last name, it's going to move to the person who matches what I've typed so far. Okay, but what's really nice is I can also click on these little headers to sort other than alphabetically. So if I click on the birth date, it's going to sort my database by the birth date. Okay, if I click on the birthplace, it's going to sort my database by the birthplace. So I can click on any header within this, death date, death place, within this to group my people or to sort them in a particular order. When I want to sort back by the name, I can click on that as well and get back to the name. Okay, now what's really nice is I can come in here and I can customize this view. When I do that, RootsMagic is going to show you the available columns that you can add. You can actually add different columns to this particular view. It's also on the right going to show you the columns that you already have. It doesn't show the name as a column because that always is on there. It's going to show you the columns that you can add or take off. So if you wanted to happen to have, let's say, I don't know even that I have too much information on in here. Let's go with occupation. If I click on occupation, I can say add that to my view, and it will add it to the view. Now, at this point, it's going to be the last column, so it's going to be the far one on the right. But if I want that occupation to be after the record number, I can move that up so that that's after the record number. So I can add up to 50 columns to this screen. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it's added the occupation. If I click on that occupation, okay, I have 2 occupations down there out of the whole database. But you can see that I can actually sort by the occupation as well. Now, if I have data off the right side of this screen, I can scroll over to it. You'll notice that as I scroll over, the name field stays on the screen. So if I did have 50 columns worth of data on here, I wouldn't have to worry about going over to the 49th column, seeing the information that I wanted, and then have to scroll all the way back to see who that actually belonged to. That name field is always going to stay there on the screen. Okay, the last navigation screen that we have is what's called WebSearch. And the way WebSearch works is whoever is highlighted on the main screen, when I switch to WebSearch, RootsMagic is going to search for that person in a particular search engine. Right now I don't have one picked, so I'm going to click on that and choose one. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Family Search. So when I click on Family Search, I'm going to tell it to auto search. Auto search is kind of the lazy man's way of not having to click this button every time I switch to a different person. So RootsMagic is going to show me the Daniel Smiths who match my particular Daniel Smith right here. Now, these particular results don't mean anything because, as I mentioned, this is a fake database, so these people are not really going to be found. So as I select a new person over here on the left within my list, it's going to search for Sarah Jane Mills on Family Search. Now, I can do other websites as well. If I wanted to have it search Ancestry, I can switch that to Ancestry, and RootsMagic is going to search Ancestry for Sarah Jane Mills. And again, if I click on a different person, it's going to do that search on that site for that person. Now, there's a bunch of these that are built in, Ancestry, Being, Family Search, Find a Grave, Footnote, Genealogy Bank, and so on. But you can also add your own search providers. So if there's a website that you happen to go to fairly often that is not in this built-in list, you can click on Manage Search Providers and then Customize and go ahead and add. And we'll actually have a class where we'll talk about this at another time. Okay, so that is are the 5 navigation views. Now, you'll notice that I spent some time over here on this list on the left, this little side panel. This side panel is actually a very powerful little tool. If you don't want it in the way, there's a little button right here. You'll see when I move my mouse over it, it turns green. When I click on that, it collapses that back to the left and hides it so it's not in my way. So if you want some nice clean screens, you can close that side panel and use these features with that side panel closed. And when you're ready to use it, click that and it will open that list back up. Now, the first screen, you notice it has tabs up here. This first screen is just an index. That's an alphabetical list of everybody within your file. And so as you scroll up and down, you'll see everybody in your file. Like that people view we had, I can click on a person within here and just start typing their name, and it will start moving to that person. Now, whenever I select a person within this list, it's going to move to that person on whichever view I'm looking at. So if I click on a person, it's going to show me that person on the pedigree view, or it's going to show me that person in the family view, or it's going to show me that person in the descendant view. So it works with any of those views. There's a few options you have. You can have it show alternate names. In RootsMagic, you are allowed to enter more than one name for a person. If I were to go into a person's edit screen, and he happened to also be known as Joe Cool, I could come up and say add a fact, choose the alternate name, fact type, select that, and it's going to add the alternate name. And you'll notice instead of a date and a place like you have with birth, death, burial type of things, you actually have name fields. So I could say he was known as Joe Cool. What type of name was that? Well, was it an AKA, a birth, an immigrant name, and so on. We'll say that he was given Joe Cool when he came in through Ellis Island, and you know, he was one of those lucky ones that got an awesome name. So I can go ahead and do that and click Save. Now, he now has an alternate name entered within the program. When I close this, when I scroll up here, there we go. There's Joe Cool. And you'll see that when I click on Joe Cool, it brings up Harlem Smith. So I can actually find people based on other names, whether it's a maiden name or however you want to do that. If I don't want those to show up, then I can click on Show Alternate Names to uncheck that, and Joe Cool is not showing up there. Now, one question we always get, this is a little piece of trivia, so this will be something you know that nobody else seems to know. Everybody's always asking us, what is that little picture supposed to be? They can't really tell. Well, if you look at that picture, what it really is, it's one of those little name tags that says, hi, my name is, you know, Joe Cool. So that's what that is, one of those little name tag sticker thingies. You can't really tell what it is because it's so small, but now you know a little piece of trivia there. Under the options, you also have the ability to turn off the birth year. So if you don't want that birth year, you can have that turned off. You can have it show the record number. You can have it show all of them. So it's up to you how you want to kind of customize that. Now, the other pieces of information on this side panel, there's the second tab, is the Family tab. What the Family tab does is shows you all the immediate family members of whoever's highlighted on the screen. So if I click on a person here, it's going to show his spouses and children and his parents and any of his siblings, so any of his immediate relatives. And you can actually, from this screen, select any of those relatives, click Go, and it will jump to that person on that screen that you're on. Okay. Next tab are the bookmarks. Now, there may have been times when you've wandered around in your database and you were working on somebody and you needed to take off and you realized that it was maybe kind of a pain to find that person when you got back. Well, what you can do is if you're wandering around out here, let's say I'm working with Isaac Mead, if I'm going to come back to him later or need to, I just click plus and it adds him to my bookmarks. So I'm going to go ahead and click that Control Home. If you remember, I mentioned Control Home takes you back to the root person. So I've taken that back to the root person. Well, anytime I need to get back to Isaac Mead, I can come into my bookmarks, select him, click Go, and it's going to jump to Isaac Mead. So this is where you can keep those people that you're working with that you kind of need to get to quickly, and so you don't have to go search for them every time. Okay, the fourth tab is the history. And the history is a list of the last 200 or 300 people that you've actually wandered around through as you've been working in the program. So as I move to another person, so for example, if I move down, you'll see right now it's on Isaac Mead. When I move down to Betsy Mead, it adds her to the top of the list, shifts everybody down. So I can come in here at any point, and this works just like that index. If I click on any of these people, it'll jump me right to them very quickly. If I want to clear this list out, just click Clear, and it's cleared out, and you're starting over. Okay, this last tab, I'm not going to spend really any time on this last tab, but this would be a fun thing for you to go play with. What this does is let you create what's called a named group. Now, throughout the program, there's places where it may ask you to select a group of people to do something with. You may go in and select a person and their ancestors. You may select everybody born in a particular location, everybody that died after a particular date. Well, normally you have to go in and create that group every time you're going to use that group of people. What named groups lets you do is click on New and go in and select a group of people. And you can do it the hard way by selecting people one at a time, or you can say mark a group and say mark the family of the highlighted person, mark everybody in the database, mark the ancestors or descendants, or let me select people by data fields. That's where you can select people, everybody born in a particular location or after a particular date or that has a particular name. Once you've selected a group of people, you tell it OK, you enter the name for the group. I happen to just randomly pick people, so I could just say random people. So my group right here is called random people. That group right there has those people that I selected. And when I have these named groups, I can come right here and select them from this list to get a filtered list of people as opposed to the entire list of everybody in my database under that index. Now those named groups aren't available just there. They're also available if I were to come up to the File menu and go down and say I want to export a file. Well, when I export a file, right here I have the option to be able to export everybody, or I could select people from a list. But if I have named groups, I can choose them right here. They'll automatically be there, and I can just choose them right there, and I don't have to go in to select from a list and pick them over and over again. Okay, so that's the sidebar. Let me go in real quick.
We've had a couple questions about the root person, how you set the root person and how you go back to the root person.
Okay, a couple of things with the root person. There's a number of ways. If you happen to see the person that you want to be the root person on your screen, whether it's on the pedigree view or the family view or whatever, just right-click your mouse. And there's a number of options, editing people and adding, but there's an option right here called Set as Root Person. So James Smith there, if I click on Set as Root Person, he is now the root person. The way to get back to the root person, as I mentioned earlier, I can click on Search and choose Go to Root Person, or I can press Control Home. So now if I press Control Home, it's going to jump to that James Smith. It's going to put him down there in that root position because he is now the root person. Okay, if I want to bring the root person back to being Dr. James Smith, just right-click, say Set as Root Person. Now, that root person may not always be sitting right there on your screen. You may know who you want, but he may not be right there on the screen. If that's the case, come up to Tools, go down to File Options. When you go to File Options, the very first thing you're going to see is Root Person. And if you click on Root Person, it's going to bring up a list of everybody in the file, and you can select the person and click Select, and it will change the root person to that person you select. So you can pick anybody in your file to be the root person. Okay. Now there's a couple of other pieces of information that I want to show that are on this screen before we move on. And one of those is when I highlight a person, you'll notice that it's going to show the picture, the person's name, and then their birth, marriage, and death information up here in this info screen. It's also going to show some information up here on the left of that info area. There may be a number of different little icons up here. If I select a person, you'll see there's a little notepad. That means this person has notes. The little certificate means this person has sources. The little camera means this person has pictures. And if I click on any of those, if I click on the little notepad, it's going to show me what kind of notes they have. They have a birth note and a marriage note. And if I click one of those, it's going to bring up that birth note, that Howard was born in the family home during a blizzard, been snowing for 3 days, and so on. So it's going to bring up the note. If I click on that sources, it's going to show me the same thing. He has birth sources and education sources. So if I click on birth sources, it's going to show me the birth sources that this person has. And likewise, if I click on the little camera, it's going to bring up the photo album for that person. Okay, now quickly, I'm going to go in through here. I'm going to double click on a person to open up his edit screen. Now, we kind of touched on this briefly earlier. On the edit screen, you're going to have one row that's always there, and that's the person's name row. And it's going to be titled Person. It's going to have the person's name, and then it will have 3 sections right here showing whether this person has a person note, person sources, or person pictures. Now, there will also be a line for each spouse that you've got entered. There will also be a line for any set of parents that the person has entered. And as you select a piece of information, over on the right, it's going to let you edit that information. So when I highlight that person's name row, I can edit the person's name right from here. I can change the sex if I need to. I also can enter the note for the person, and the note editor is basically just a simple text editor. It has spell check, a thesaurus, it has search and replace. You can use bold, italics, and underlining. I can also enter sources for the person. If I click on that, I can go in here and I can add a new source. And if I select add a new source, you can choose what type of source. And as I mentioned, later this month we're going to have a class just on sources. We're going to spend an entire hour on how to enter these sources, which follow evidence explained, so you can easily enter sources exactly the way they should be entered, and it's easy. It's just fill in the blanks, and so we're going to have a full class on that. I can also go in and click on the media to bring up the media album to add pictures. Easy to add pictures. I click on Add New Media. RootsMagic asks, what type of media am I adding? Am I adding an image? Am I adding a file, a sound clip, or a video clip? Now, images, sound clips, and video clips, those are all pretty straightforward, and you can select them right off your computer hard drive. What file lets you do is add documents. It can be a Word document, an Excel file, it can be a PDF, it can be anything that's not really an image file, but you can add that to the person's scrapbook so that if you've got a particular file or document that you want tied to that person within your database, that's a good way to do that. Now, if you do happen to choose image, you do have another button right here where you can scan the picture in directly. So you can select it, click on disk. It'll let you select the image right straight from your folder, your hard drive, or you can click on scan. If you're entering a file, a sound clip, or a video clip, you can't scan audio or video, so that becomes disabled. Okay, the last 2 items, I can add an address. So if I click on address, I can enter a primary and a secondary address. So if you happen to live in New York during the summer and Florida during the winter, you can keep track of both of those. Now, this particular address is intended to put the address for living people, okay, because these addresses are used for printing address labels, address mailing lists, things like that. If what you're trying to keep track of is places where a person lived, then you're better off, instead of coming down to address and entering an address for living people, you're better off coming up to add a fact and going down to a fact type here called residence. The advantage of residence is that there's no limit. So if a person lived in 15 different places during their life, you can add 15 different residences. You also have the ability to enter a date. So you can say from this date to that date, they lived at this residence. From this date to this date, they lived at this residence. And since it is a fact, treated just like birth or whatever, you also have notes, your sources, your media. So you can put scanned images of the house where they lived. You can put sources, the deed to the house that showed that they lived there or that they owned the house, and then notes to tell the story about that particular house that they lived in. So that's the best way to do that.
Now,
okay.
there have been a couple questions on the media does it copy the media into your RootsMagic file, or does it just reference the file on your hard drive?
Okay, when you add an image, RootsMagic does not embed the picture inside of the file. The reason for that is twofold. One, if you try to take an image and put it inside of the file, one, it's going to make your file huge. That file is going to get bigger and bigger. The second is the possibility for corruption. Anytime you take binary files like images and try to convert them into a format that can be held within a data file, you're opening that file up to corruption. So when you add a picture to a person, let me go ahead and select this person and bring up the properties. What it does is it actually links to the picture on your hard drive. Okay, so if you add a picture, RootsMagic is going to link to that file right there, and then when it needs that picture, it will pull it in as it needs it. Now, the one big disadvantage to that is that if you go in and move those pictures to another place on the hard drive, or you move your database to another computer and you bring those files, those picture files, over to the other computer, but you don't put them in the exact same path name, then those picture leaks get broken. So what we've done is we've added a feature, and you can get to that from any one of these media albums for any person. There's a button here called Tools. When you click on Tools, there's an option right here called Fix Broken Media Links. And when you click on that, RootsMagic goes and searches for all the files, the image files that it can't find, and tries to hunt them down and relink your pictures back up. It does that in an automated way. If it finds more than one copy of the file, then it will come up and say, we found more than one copy of this image, and let you select which one it is that you actually wanted to do. But that's a way to take care of those broken media links. So if you move your database to another computer and you bring those pictures over and you copy them into any folder on your other computer, just run that Fix Broken Media Links and it will link those all right back up for you. Okay.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of people using Macs where they have the picture on their Mac partition, and they're using RootsMagic in a Windows partition. They want to know if they can access their pictures, and the answer basically is yes. If you make your Mac partition visible to the Windows partition, it'll as long as it can see those pictures, it'll work.
Right. Okay, the last little section, one I want to talk about right here, is the to-do list. When you go into the person's to-do list, this lets you keep a track of things that you need to do. I can bring up a list of all my to-do items, click on Add Task. These are my to-do items for Howard Smith Sr. I'm going to say Add a Task, and I can enter, what do I need to do? Find a birth certificate. Okay, I have the prioritizing, so I can say this is high priority or low priority or anything in between. When do I need to do it? Is this still open? Have I completed it? Is it pending or a problem? Sometimes people will create a to-do list, and when they find or finish that to-do item, they'll just go in and delete the to-do item, and that's fine. Other times you may just want to mark it as completed to keep it kind of as a research log to show what you've actually accomplished. You can keep track of the date you started on this to-do item, the date you last worked on it, the date you completed it, where do I need to do it? And you have two options. You can select an address of one of the people in your file. That's useful if you're needing to contact somebody in your family to get that information. Or you can select a repository. That's useful if you need to contact a library or the archives or some place like that to do this information. And then finally, you have the details and results. This is where you can put the full details of what it is you need to work on, and as you come up with results, whether those results are I looked here and didn't find it, or whether I looked here and did find it, you can keep track of that. And like the note field, you do have the ability to use things like bold, italics, and underlining. You have spell checking here. You just don't have the little buttons to do it. But if you click your right mouse button here you'll see it's going to bring up a menu of all those options. So you can do your bold, italics, underline, you have your spell check and thesaurus, you have search and replace. You have all of those items just as if you were in the note editor. You just don't have a toolbar button to actually select for them. Okay. Last. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Oh, we've had quite a few people ask. In the case of Howard, he has 2 spouses named Phoebe,
mm-hmm.
and it's obviously they're the same person. A lot of people seem to be having the problem where they accidentally type in a spouse twice, or they have an empty spouse. They want to know how to remove an extra spouse.
Okay. When you have the extra spouse, what that is really telling you is that you have 2 different families. So in this case, you notice that we have Howard Smith with Phoebe, spelled with Own and O. That's being displayed right here. You can see that she's the one that's checked right there, and so that's the one that's showing. And then there's the 5 children. If I switch to the Phoebe with the O, you'll see that in this case, this Phoebe doesn't, this family right here, Howard with Phoebe, there are no children. So there's a couple of things you can do. You could either go in to this Phoebe and right-click on her and say Merge, and then choose, that'll bring up Phoebe, and then go in and choose the other Phoebe and go ahead and merge those duplicates. That's one way you can do that. In this case, another option is, since there are no children listed right here, I could come up to Phoebe right here, and I could right-click and say delete this person. Okay, in other words, I can delete this Phoebe that doesn't have any information. If I bring it up, you'll see there's no information for her other than the fact that they're married. There are no facts, so it doesn't hurt to delete her in this case. Now, most of the time, though, we're not quite that lucky. Most of the time, if we have the 2 different spouses, there will be children with both of those. Okay. What happens is if I go in and I delete the one of those 2 Phoebes, that's when you end up with the situation that was described earlier where it says unknown spouse. Whenever you see unknown spouse, what that basically means is that there is a family record inside of RootsMagic that has a father but no mother, or a mother but no father, but there are also children. So the unknown spouse just means that the spouse is not there, but most likely there are children which are in that family, which causes that family to have that family record to have to be there. The way you can get rid of an unknown spouse, so like for example, if I were to go in here and delete Phoebe Sophia Davis, I would have Howard Smith with an unknown spouse and would have these children. Whenever you have an unknown spouse, come to this family view, bring up the person with the unknown spouse. It's just going to show as blank right here in the either the mother or the father position, depending on which spouse is unknown. But just bring up that person with the unknown spouse. Then what you'll do is you'll come up here to Edit, and then you'll say Delete Family. Now, when you delete a family, I'm going to go ahead and say this because it's going to ask me for some confirmation. There's 2 different types of delete family. The first one, and the default, is just unlink all the people from each other. The second one is delete all those family members. So if you have a person with an unknown spouse, just go in and say delete family and just choose unlink family members. What that does is gets rid of that family record that's basically causing that unknown spouse to appear. And that unknown spouse will basically disappear once that family record disappears because you've unlinked the family members from each other. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay.
Nope, you can go on.
Okay. I just want to touch one last item, and that is the search. Now, some searching is easy. Some searching, I can just click on the little list on the side and just start typing the person's name. Smith, comma, James or John or whatever, I can just start typing and it's going to search and basically show me that information on the right. Sometimes I want to search a little bit more in more detail, and so to do a search, what I want to do is click on this button up on the toolbar that looks like a little magnifying glass, and that brings up what's called RootsMagic Explorer. This is a list of everybody in my file, and as I select a person on that list, over here on the right, it's going to show me all that person's individual information, and it's going to show me all of their immediate family members. Okay. From here, I can go over here and edit the person, or I can edit the notes, sources, media, to-do, address. I can edit the different pieces of information for that person. So you can actually use this as a little simple genealogy program where everything is just in an alphabetical list. You go down through the list and you can edit that. Okay. This screen, like the others, if I type in SMITH, JOH, it's going to find John Michael Smith. But there's also other ways I may want to search. There's a button right here called NameFind. If I click on NameFind, this actually gives me a little bit more power. It looks pretty straightforward. It's just asking for the given name or the surname. So if I type John Smith and tell it OK, it's going to find that same John Smith. Okay. In that case, it doesn't seem like that's any more useful than just typing their name. But let's see if we have a Mary Smith. And I don't know if we do, but we're going to experiment right here. I'm going to say Mary Smith. Okay. You notice that it came down and it found Mary Elizabeth Davis. Well, the reason that Mary Smith stopped on her is because if you look right here, Mary Elizabeth Davis married George Wells Smith. So she is a Mary Smith. So this NameFind not only finds people by their maiden name, but it will also find them by their married name as well. It also will show by their nickname. On this given name, it will find people based on their middle name. So, for example, if I came up to here and I said NameFind, and I said find Elizabeth Smith, okay, it found Mary Elizabeth Davis because it will find them by middle names as well as their first name. So it's a very powerful little tool. It will also find them on their nickname. So if you're looking for somebody by their nickname, it will find that as well. This option right here, allow close matches, that will find people. So if I type in Smith as a surname, it will find that whether it's spelled S-M-I-T-H, S-M-Y-T-H, S-M-Y-T-H-E. So it will allow close matches. It's going to use what's called SoundX to find matches that are close but not exact. Okay, the last find I'm going to show you is the Find button. And when I click on that Find button, this brings up a screen which we had shown a little bit earlier. I'm going to clear this because it's actually got that NameFind in there. What this lets me do is find everybody who matches a particular what's called criteria. This screen might look a little intimidating, but it's really quite easy to use. So for example, I want to go search for everybody whose birth, and once I select birth, it gives me some options. Am I looking for birth date, birthplace, birth details, and so on? I can pick, kind of whatever I want. So I'm going to say I want everybody whose birthplace equals, contains, I'm going to pick contains England. Okay, so I'm going to say everybody whose birthplace contains England. I'm going to click OK, and it goes to my first person whose birthplace contains England. Okay, at this point I can just click on Next to go to the next one. Right there, birthplace contains England. Next one. I can also go back. So if I'm kind of whipping through this real quick and I overshoot somebody that I was looking for, I can click Prior to start going backwards through this list. Okay, I'm going to go back in here to Find again, and that's information still there. Like I say, you're not limited to just birth date and birthplace. You can say birth note. Everybody whose birth note contains something or source. Birth age. Birth age is actually pretty useless. Everybody's birth age that I've ever seen is 0, but that age does work well for things like death, because I can go in and say, I want everybody whose death age is greater than 70. That gives me a list of everybody who lived to be at least 70. Or everybody whose death age is less than 20. That's going to give me everybody who died before they were 20. I can also say everybody whose birth fact even exists. So if I want to know, do they have a birth fact or not, that's what exists is for. Okay, and I can also come over here after I filled out that first row, and I can say birth exists and or this, and so on. So I can get very, very powerful searches right here, and it will basically give me that the ability to move back and forth through this in that way. Okay, that's basically a quick overview on getting started on how to add and edit people, how to search for people, how the various navigation screens work. What I'm going to do, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through these menu items, and we're going to I'm just going to briefly mention what each one does. A lot of times when I get into a new program, I'll look through the menus and I'll see a bunch of stuff up there that I'm not sure exactly what they do. So we're going to tell you exactly what they do very quickly. We'll whip through this. This is being recorded, so you'll be able to go back and watch it over and over and over if you have any questions. File. This lets you create a new file. This lets you open a file you've already had. Open Recent will give you a list of files that you've opened recently, so that you can just come over here and open a new file without having to search for it. Search for files actually starts searching your hard drive and looks for all your RootsMagic files. Close closes this file. Rename lets me rename this file. This file right now is called Sample. So I could come down here, click on that, and change it from Sample to something else. Delete lets me delete this file. I did that a little earlier. Copy lets me make a copy of this file. So if I want a copy of this exact file that I can play with and mangle up without hurting my original one, I can do that. Printer report, that's the same as clicking the little printer button up on the toolbar. It opens up all the possible prints. Print setup, this is where I can choose my printer. Import lets me import from Legacy, Family Tree Maker, PAF, GEDCOM, RootsMagic, older RootsMagic files, and Family Origins files. Export lets me create a GEDCOM file. Family Search Central, we're going to have a whole class on this in a couple of weeks. Family Search Central lets me work with the new family search. Backup lets me create a backup of my database. It takes my database and archives it, compresses it up, makes a smaller version so that I have a good backup. I want to keep that backup separate from my hard drive. You can back it up onto a CD. You can back it up onto a flash drive. You can back it up onto your hard drive and email it to yourself so that you have a copy off-site. Restore is the opposite. That is where you select a backup and it opens it back up into your system. Properties is where you can see how many people you have, how many families, how many events. This is going to give you all your details, the last date you worked on that file, and the file name. Okay, let's go through the rest of these a lot quicker. Edit, that's the same as double-clicking on a person, brings up their edit screen. Delete lets you delete people or families. Unlink, this lets you unlink people from each other. If you've linked somebody to the wrong person, if you've got somebody linked to the wrong parents, you can unlink them. Rearrange lets you rearrange the children of a family in the proper order, or rearrange a person's spouses. Swap husband and wife is not what it sounds like. What that does is if you ever have entered a person as a father and another person as a mother, and you got them backwards, let's say they had names like Kim or Chris where you weren't really sure, that basically switches them in place. LDS ordinances, if a person's LDS, that lets them work with those. This gives you a list of your sources, a list of your to-do items, a list of all your pictures in your file, a list of all your addresses that you've added to people, a list of all the repositories, that would be your archives, your libraries, your things like that. A correspondence list lets you keep track of letters and emails and things like that you've seen. A list of all the places that you've entered into your file. A list of all fact types, birth, death, burial. If you've created your own user-defined fact types, those will show there as well. Source templates, that'll take a whole class by itself. That's where you can actually go in and create your own source templates. And like I say, that'll be covered in a later class. Your 4 types of adding that we mentioned: adding an individual, unlinked to unlinked person, not linked to anybody in your file, or adding a spouse, parents, or child, whoever's highlighted on the screen. These are the same views that you have by selecting the tabs across the top: your pedigree, family, descendant, people, web. Immediate family, that's going to bring up this tab right here. Sidebar is going to open this sidebar or close it. It'll open or close that sidebar right there. Search. The person list, that's the Explorer we showed you, a list of everybody in your file. Family list, that's going to give you a list of all of your families. Okay, it's going to show you the father, the mother. When you select a family, it's going to show you the children. You can edit the father or the mother right here, or you can sort those differently. You can sort by the father or the mother or the date. Okay, go to the root person, move to primary position. If you're highlighting a person on the screen, if you're highlighting Betsy and you want to move her down to here without making her the root person, that's what move to primary position does, is it moves her down to that root position without actually making her the root person. The rest of these bookmarks, history, those are items that are on that side list that we talked about. Reports. If I click on print a report, that brings up my report form, where I can choose the different kinds of reports: charts, forms, labels, lists, narratives, blank and custom reports, and so on. And I can choose them from there. The rest of these are basically specific types of reports that you can choose right from this menu. Publisher, we're going to have a whole class on Publisher. Publisher lets you combine a bunch of different reports all into one report, all into one book. So you can combine narrative reports, pedigree charts, group sheets, all of those into one book with a cover page, a title page, a table of contents, the index, a list of your sources, a bibliography, everything. That lets you put together a whole book. Okay, your tools. This lets you merge duplicate records. This lets you search for problems. If you go into the problem list, that's going to let you find people who were born after their mom died, things like that. Count trees is going to count how many individual little separate trees you have within your file. You can spell check. You have a gazetteer, 3.5 million place names in this database that you can search from. So if you have the name of a city and a state, this will give you the county. That gazetteer is the current places, so it's not necessarily historical, although there are some historical places within there. Mapping, we'll have a whole class on mapping. That lets you actually view maps of where people lived and where people had events within their life. The rest of these tools, go in and play with them. We won't really spend any time here telling you about them. Just go in and play with them. They can't really hurt anything. They just are different ways of taking your data and analyzing them. Create a shareable CD. We'll let you create a CD of your database, all of your pictures and media, with a read-only version of RootsMagic that you can give as gifts or send to somebody as a gift, where you say, here's a CD with our entire family, with all our media. What they don't know is you're actually giving them a backup that they can keep in case you ever lose your database. You can go back to them and say, oh, remember that CD I gave you? You wouldn't happen to have that, so I can get it back. You can use that as a backup. Some internet features, and then window features, and then help. This is a very important feature. The number one, press F1. If you press that F1 key on your keyboard, that's going to bring up help on whatever you happen to be working on at the time. Full-blown, you have your table of contents right here, and you can go through the whole thing. The RootsMagic interface, there it is. There's the screen. Talks about the main menu, what your menu choices are, what those main menus are. So kind of what we were just doing, that's what this little section of the help file is for. Finally, something that you can't see here, but again, we're going to have a class on RootsMagic to Go. One of the great things about RootsMagic is that you can run it on a flash drive. The program, the data, everything. So, you know, we'll have a class on that as well. So that's the quick and dirty getting started with RootsMagic. We squeezed a lot in here. Whether you were subscribed or registered for this or not, you can go at any time and look at the look at the recorded one, which will be up later this evening, and go back through, and you'll be able to kind of look at whatever we talked about here. So that's getting started with RootsMagic, and so I'm going to turn the time back over to Mike.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we've had quite a few questions here, and you've answered a lot of them, and I've tried to, just through chat, answer some as they've come up. But like Bruce said, there's been a lot of material covered in this webinar, and in future webinars we'll definitely have more time to pick specific topics and spend more time dedicated to them. A couple people pointed out that we do have a printed book that's available called Getting the Most Out of RootsMagic. It's available at our website at rootsmagic.com. And a lot of people, they have commented that they found that book to be very helpful. A couple odds and ends just to close out. That this webinar was recorded. It will be available in the future at on our website at rootsmagic.com/webinars. And if you go there now, you can sign up for future webinars. We have some classes scheduled through the beginning of February. And also, there is a link to a survey where you can let us know about webinar topics that you're interested in. Just based on some of these questions and comments we've gotten, I can see a lot of topics that people are interested in. So please go there to the survey and let us know what things you want to learn about. And then finally, a big thank you to you for participating. I feel like it's gone off pretty well for our first webinar. We've had relatively few glitches in getting up and running, and I think it's gone pretty smoothly. And just thank you all for coming and attending, and especially those of you who gave up your sleep and are there in the middle of the night watching. Hopefully we've kept you awake. So until then, see you at the next webinar.